Well, good morning, my stitchy friends. How are we all this morning? Welcome to my channel, The Needlebug, and my name is Karen. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome anyone who is new, and I hope that you find things here that are enjoyable and you keep coming back and, of course, subscribing to my channel. And to those that have been following me for a while, and I know there is many of you, I thank you so very much. We really appreciate it. But I'd like to take a minute to give a special shout out to someone who is not a cross stitcher, but is very near and dear to my heart, who I love like a son, and that is my son-in-law, Adam. Adam watches all my videos, even though he doesn't stitch. So, Adam, thanks for dropping by. And you know we love you as much as we love our own daughter. So, thanks for stopping in. And with that, we will move on. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to review all my works in progress, the few that, well, the ones that I'm actively working on. I would like to do a review of, or a comparison of my Nurge embroidery stand against my Potoky embroidery stand, which finally came last week. Thank heaven. I was so thrilled. So that's what's up. And then I will answer some questions that I had on the latest videos. So let's start out with the best new things since my last video. Top of my list is on best new things is that I had both myself and my husband had our second dose of the vaccine. So we are now fully vaccinated. What a relief. What a relief. I'm so glad. Have to remember though, it doesn't mean that people can do whatever they want and not follow guidelines and use precautions. Those things still need to happen. But the good thing is if either of us would contact the virus, that we would not get as sick as we possibly could have had we not had the vaccine. So that is top of the list for best new things this week. My second best new thing is my Potoky stand came. So we will talk about that stand just a little bit later. And I really like the mini stand that I got and would love to order the floor stand, which is a hoop holder floor stand. If any of you watch Luda, Stitching with Luda, she has one and she did a video on it. Oh, quite some time ago, but there is a video out there. And when I talk about the comparison in stands, I will put some pictures in of um, the floor stand. But my husband said, if you want it, just order it. We can afford it. So guess what? I ordered one. Now, it's probably going to be a while because my mini stand that I ordered, I'm going to say I ordered in August, like towards the end of August or beginning of September, somewhere in there, only came last week. So it's going to take quite a while for it to be made and get here, but it's ordered. So I'm thrilled. I am just thrilled to pieces to be able to get that. And I plan on being able to use that in the living room because over here I'll either use I have options of stands to use over here in my craft room. Um, but I wanted that one for the living room because those that have followed me for a while know that I've had trouble with my left hand and it doesn't accommodate holding a hoop or a Q-snap for any great length of time. So hence the need for stands. So those are my 3 best new things this week. And I'm just one happy little camper. So let's move on to what I've been working on. Still unsettled, guys. I am having trouble sinking my teeth into any one project. But then as I think about that, maybe that's okay because it gives me more to show you guys. So if I was just like Stitcher's Retreat, I was so focused on that was really the only thing I was stitching on and the only thing I had to show, which is why I didn't do a lot of this type of video, because other than Stitcher's Retreat, I had nothing to show you. So this time I have 3 that I'm actively working on, and not really having a rotation per se, but just kind of picking up whatever it is that I felt like working on any given day. So the first one I worked on is Once Upon a Time. Now this is the quick stitch from an Amy Stewart design. So what I did is I worked a bit on this diagonal over here, that last, whoops, which way? There we go. This last diagonal, and then I filled in all of this yesterday. So she's getting some love. What I should do, and I'll remember to do that for next time, is write down the number of stitches. Oh, there we go. There we go. So that's where we are on Once Upon a Time. And Adam, if you're listening yet, don't tell Jen this is for her. Because this is about, in the land of enchanted books, there was a girl that loved to read. So don't you think that's highly appropriate for Jen? So don't tell her. She probably knows, but don't tell her. Okay, so that's the first one. That's being stitched on 20 count easy grid. And, well, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. The other one I worked on, and I had showed this last time. I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of progress shown, that I don't think I did a whole lot on this, if I'm remembering correctly. And I didn't think far enough ahead to take pictures of where it was before I started stitching. So I will take pictures this time so I can put it in. But this is, okay, here we go. This is fractal. So as you see, the majority of it is black stitching. Yeah, black. Lots and lots of black. So what I did is I worked on this diagonal here, have it almost down to the bottom, and then came up here to the top and started another one, because what I think I'm going to do is just complete diagonals across what currently fit in a Q-snap or a hoop and work that way, and then drop down so that I don't have to move the hoop or the Q-snap so often. Yeah, it kind of gets a little annoying after a while. So this is coming along, and it got a little bit of love. So that's where we are on this. I was thinking about doing some cross country. And I'm still debating on that. Still up in the air about that. Now on this, let's see if I can get closer here. You don't see column lines on this one at this point in time. On my Stitcher's Retreat, I was seeing column lines. No matter which way I stitched, whether it was a straight column, whether it was a diagonal column. And that really bothered me, and it's making me maybe rethink some things. But I have some questions later on that we'll talk about that a little more. And then the other one I worked on, and I probably have to get back here a little bit to show you this one, is window with a view. Okay. So I was working up here at the top, and I had started to work down the diagonal. I had started this diagonal. Okay. But then I decided, if you remember Stitcher's Retreat, I was always saying how the top part got so heavy and it was hard to hold things with that being so heavy. So I decided to work down the side and come down here to the bottom and work on the bottom and work from the bottom up. Now here I'm still stitching on the diagonal, but again, I'm kind of rethinking that. I'm kind of rethinking a couple things because, well, this being unsettled has brought some things to the forefront that I didn't really think about when I was only working on Stitcher's Retreat. So I worked this down to be sure that I was at the right place and that everything was going to meet when I worked upwards. So we're at this point. Now again, this is on 22 count hardanger fabric. I'm not at this point seeing diagonal lines. Maybe I think I see one ever so faintly every once in a while. But it remains to be seen. So that's what I've been working on. Those three things. And I have been picking up whichever one I've been in the mood for at any given time. So let's see. I'm going to do the review of the stands at the end. Okay. So let's talk about some questions. Lynn asked about the benefits of diagonal stitching. And when I first started the For the Love of Diagonal Cross Stitching Facebook group, I was really all about diagonal stitching. And I was of the opinion that it helped to prevent lines in your work, whether it be page lines or column lines or diagonal lines. And the more the group was evolving, the more it was coming out that people were getting lines on the diagonal. And many people talked about method of stitching, crossing one X at a time versus not crossing one X at a time and working one way across your row and then coming back and crossing them, and which was better to avoid getting those column lines. And I experimented with that also, and for me, and from what I can see on Stitcher's Retreat, it really didn't make much of a difference. But that was the reason I was a big proponent of diagonal stitching, was to avoid lines. Now, the other thing that it does is you can put a piece down, come back to it a year later, and know exactly where you are. Because I was stitching stitch by stitch, row by row, down the column. So as I would complete one row of stitches, I'd park below that, complete the next row of stitches, park below that. I didn't park more than 10 stitches away in any direction. And you knew exactly, you could pick your piece up and know exactly where you were. You didn't have to, like when you're cross-country stitching or extreme cross-country, you pick it up and you kind of have to figure out, okay, what did I stitch? What didn't I stitch? Where am I? And all of that goes with it. So that is one big advantage of it, is you know where you are. It's not hard, and you can easily, quickly pick up and move merrily along and begin stitching. The other thing that it does and is very nice is it makes all those high confetti areas much, much easier to deal with because you're stitching, for those that stitch row by row, you're stitching your confetti stitches along with everything else, and they aren't as unnerving as they can be if you have to go back and fill them in. And there's things to be said for that. Yeah, if you have to go back and fill them in, um, is it like looking for a needle in a haystack? Because it might just be one stitch of a color in the midst of this entirely stitched area. And then you have to be careful because you're coming up in what we call dirty holes, because they already have 3 threads going down through them, and then you're coming up, and when you come up, are any of those stitches going to become loose? And then that gives your piece that bumpy look. So, dirty holes you want to be going down in and coming up in a hole that is either completely empty or maybe only has 1 thread in, because then your likelihood of loosening up that stitch is a whole lot less. So there are a lot of advantages to stitching on the diagonal, that being a few of them. But like I said, what's bothering me at this point in time is the column or the diagonal or the page lines. Yes, it's by all means a tension issue. Absolutely. Tension has a lot to do with it. Personally, I like to think that my stitching is quite even. I like to think that. Um, let's look here. You can, okay, there we go. I don't get the bumps. My stitches look even. I, at this point, am not seeing column lines. But when you're talking about a piece that's going to be years in the making, it's maybe hard to keep a consistent tension. Your tension varies with your mood of the moment. If you're upset about something, maybe your tension's going to be tighter. If you're having a really good day, maybe it's going to be a little looser. It can vary with how you're feeling deep inside. So, there's a lot to be said for that. So, I guess I'm not sure if I answered your question, Lynn. There are advantages to diagonal stitching and there are disadvantages, just like anything else. And I think what needs to happen is people need to, like we talked about before, experiment and see what method works the best for you. And even though I've been stitching full coverage designs for quite a while now, I'm still not so sure of exactly what that method is that works for me. So we're still going to switch. And sometimes it's just the mood of the day. Like, okay, I'm not really into diagonal stitching today, so I'm going to flip around all over the place, or I'm not in the mood to go row by row, stitch by stitch. Maybe I'm going to follow that color down the column, or I'm going to pick a section of maybe 3 blocks, 3 squares by 3 squares, and cross country within that. And really, it does not hurt to switch your means of stitching on a particular piece. You can't tell on the front which way you stitched it. The only way you can tell is the back. So, do I still advocate as much as I did for diagonal stitching as I did in the past. I don't think so. I think it's up to each individual, and it's just another skill set that is out there for you to utilize if that works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, you stitch what makes and whatever method makes you happy. So, hope that answers. Then I had Deborah Blanson asked, can you do any project on linen even if you bought it for Aida? And she's assuming that would make the project smaller. Deb, you can stitch a project on whatever your heart desires. All you got to do is look at the count and figure out your size. And if you bought it for Aida cloth and you wanted to use 18 count Aida or Aida, Jean Farish always says Aida, so I'm not sure which way is the correct way to pronounce it, but I pronounce it Aida. And you want to stitch it on linen? Absolutely you can. If you want it to be the same size and you bought 18 count Aida and you want to stitch it on linen and be the same size, then you would use a 36 count linen and stitch over 2. If you bought it for 14 count Aida, then you could use a 28 count linen and stitch over 2. If you wanted to, for example, you bought it for 14 count Aida and you wanted to use a 28 count linen or even weave and stitch over 1, which you certainly can do as long as the project isn't calling for half stitches and quarter stitches, you can certainly do that. Then your finished project is going to be 1/4 of the size that it would be on Aida, because you're stitching over 1. So you're going to lose half the width and you're going to lose half the length. So it's going to be 1/4 the size that it would be on 14 count Aida. Same thing if you had 18 count Aida and you stitched it on 36 count linen over 1, it will be 1/4 of the size of the piece on Aida cloth. So to keep it the same size as the Aida cloth, you would get the equivalent linen and stitch over 2. So if it's 14 count, you want 28 count linen. If it's 16 count Aida, you want 32 count linen. If it's 18 count Aida, you want 36 count linen. 20 count Aida, you want 40 count linen. So do you see the similarity there? Because on the linen, you're going to stitch over 2. And that will keep it the same size. If you stitch it over 1, it's going to be 1/4 of the size. So I hope that helps, Deb. If I didn't answer your question, please leave me another message and I will try my best to get you what you need. Vicki asked about my needle size, and well, she actually asked 2 things: the size needle I used and what brand. My favorite brand needle is a bowhin needle. And at this point in time, I'm using a size 26 for basically everything that I stitch. I very, very rarely, if ever, well, no, I can't say that. I very, very rarely use a 28 needle anymore. About the only time I will use a 28 needle is if I'm stitching on 56 count linen over 2. And in the in my opening part of this video, you saw a blackbird piece that was in a tray, and it was the spring, winter, summer blackbird piece. That's done on 56 count linen, and for that I used a 28 needle. Um, but when we're talking about needles, I think the biggest thing to remember and to help you decide what size needle to use is you want a needle that will accommodate the thread you are using without causing it to fray at the end or to, how can I say, you want the thread to be able to pass easily through the eye, first of all. So if you're using, say, pearl cotton, you by no means am going to use a 28 needle because the thread won't fit through. If you're using pearl cotton, you're probably going to use a 24 needle because that's the size that pearl cotton is easily going to pass through the eye of the needle. And you want that needle to open the hole in your fabric enough so that your thread does not drag as it goes through the fabric, because that's what causes it to fray at the end or it to wear thin at a spot. And well, the wearing thin, in fact, I just had this happen yesterday, and it's the first time it has happened in years. But I must not have been as conscious about moving my needle along the thread. And I used an exceptionally long piece of thread because it was a little bit longer than what I normally use, but if I cut it in half, it was going to be way too short. One of those in-between situations. So I used it, but I must not have moved my needle along the length of the thread. So what it did by not moving it is it caused that rubbing when it went through the hole in the fabric. It was abrading it, and it caused the fabric to just pull apart. So you don't want your thread length too long. There's a lesson learned, a lesson I know better. I do know better, but failed to adhere to my own advice. And I failed to move my needle as I normally would. So those two things contributed to that fraying. But it also will fray the tail end of your thread the same way. That friction going through the hole in the fabric abrades the fabric, abrades the thread, and causes it to fray. So you want a needle that's going to open up the hole large enough that that doesn't happen, but yet not terribly large that it looks like a hole. Okay, does that make sense? So that's kind of how you decide what size needle. If your thread is fraying, though, and I think I have also said this before, sometimes it's because there's a burr in the eye of the needle. So you do want to check. You do want to check for that. If you're having trouble, first thing you do is change your needle to make sure that it's not the burr. If it continues to happen, change the size of your needle. So, but my best favorite brand is the Bohin and a size 26. Now, the other ones that I quite enjoy are the Easy Guide needles, the one with the ball on the tip. The only thing I don't like about those, well, there's two things I don't like about those, is the eye of that needle is so thin, it is a little difficult to thread, at least for me. It's a little difficult. My cat thinks he wants to sniff around my needlework. It is a little difficult for me to thread in the method that I use for threading a needle. And if you look back, there is a video on how I thread a needle. That's one thing I don't like about them. I do like the ballpoint, however, in that it helps you find the hole easily, and um, I think stitches look a lot neater when using them. However, the second thing I don't like is that ball makes it difficult, especially when you're stitching over one, to work that thread in underneath. If you're going to bury your thread underneath some existing stitches, it does make it a little difficult to do that. And depending on what count fabric you're using, it makes it a little difficult to do a pin stitch. Because if you're using 25 count fabric, I think a lot of us have figured out that you need a sharper needle to pierce that fabric thread to be able to do that pin stitch, and you can't do that with the ball on the needle. So do you want to end up switching needles just to do a pin stitch or just to bury your thread? So I think whether you use the Easy Guide needle, you have to assess what you're going to be doing and will this needle accommodate that. So that's my little soapbox on needles. Now the other question that Vicky asked is hand-dyed fabrics. Do they shrink from the dyeing process? And my answer to that is yes, they do shrink a bit. So that if you're starting out with a 20 count linen, for example. No, I'm sorry. If you're starting out with a 40 count linen and it's being hand dyed, you're probably going to end up with something that is maybe a 42 or possibly even a 43 count linen. It probably will not be a true 40 count anymore because it will shrink somewhat from the dyeing process. I don't personally, I don't understand all that process. I don't know what their water temperatures are and all of that, but I have experienced that things do shrink up a bit when they are dyed. So that is true. Oh, let's see. What else? What did I miss here? I have my notes here in front of me. I want to thank everybody, absolutely everybody that commented on my last video when I talked about being so unsettled. And you guys offered some very fabulous suggestions. And I really, really appreciate all the suggestions that you guys have offered. What I found out, and when you're going through that process of trying to decide what do I want to stitch on now, what's going to be next, you do a lot of self-reviewing, and one of the things and you do a lot of experimenting, so you pick up a lot of pieces that maybe you have started and say, is this going to be the one that speaks out to me the loudest and what I want to make my focus project, and then still have some others to be okay, we'll pick you up every now and again. What I found that does not keep my attention very long at all are the pieces that are not full coverage. Now, I know I talked about the sampler that has my last name on it and my really wanting to stitch that. And for as much as my head really wants to stitch that, my heart doesn't. Not to say that maybe I won't change my mind and do it someday, but my heart isn't in it. I picked it up. I did, let me see. I did maybe 100 stitches. And I felt like, no, I don't want to work on this. I don't want to do it. It's not calling out to me. It's not striking my fancy. So back in the drawer it went. What else did I pick up? Oh, the Brenda Gervais, the Schoolhouse, um, that one where it's all little pin. You make them into little pillows, and it has the ABCs and all of that on it. Mm-mm. Picked that up. Did a couple stitches. Nope. Nope. Don't want to do it. I may just finish off the ones that I have finished into pillows and be done with it. I even picked up Death by Cross Stitch. Nope. Got bored. Boring. All one color. Just follow the chart. Boring. If I want boring, I'll stitch on my full coverage fractal because that's all black. And, you know, that will or will not get done at some point in time, but it's there to stitch on. So what I did find out is my preferred thing to stitch at this point in time. Can that change 6 months from now? You betcha. Will it change 6 months from now? I have no idea. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I find that the ones that are keeping my interest are the full coverage designs. I find those the most relaxing, the most rewarding, and the most, how can I say, pulls me in the most to keep stitching. And right now, I think it's going to be these three that I showed you today. These three, and that's what I'm going to stitch on. We'll see how it goes. But by doing three and switching them out, at least I'll have something to show you guys every week or two whenever we do a video. So that's kind of where I am at this point in time. So the last thing I have, and I think I need a little drink of water here. The last thing I have is to talk a little bit about the Nurge stand. Let me get this out of the way. Versus the stand I just got, which is the Potoky stand. Now, there is a previous video about the Nurge. Okay, remember this one? Put your hoop in here. Okay, and you can go back and see that. Go back and look at that video which I reviewed. I will say, now I have used this about a year. It comes with these knobs, okay, on these screws. Well, that one we changed. After I used it for a while, now this I have, oh, I can't untighten them at the moment because I didn't bring my thing over to untighten them. But anyway, this would start slipping. Okay, this would, as I worked, this would start coming down. This would start coming down. So my husband, bless him, went to the hardware store and got some different screws. There we go. Got some different screws to replace, and now I just use wing nuts. And these are tightened very tight to keep them in the position that I need to stitch with this. And I do still use this stand. So that's one thing that I wasn't exactly happy anymore with. the fact that these started to, the screws started to strip, okay? And it didn't hold anymore, so that we replaced them, and now it holds. But this is nice depending on your circumstances and where you're sitting and where you want to stitch. What I didn't like about this stand is, when you put your hoop on, let me turn it this way so you can see. You don't put your hoop on like this, because that's going to press, well, from everything I saw, that's the wrong way to put it on like this. You put it on like this, so that when you tighten it, you're tightening it onto the hoop. Okay, so it tightens onto the hoop itself rather than going down and possibly pinching your fabric. So, you have it positioned like this, you're working away, working away, working away, stitching, 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 and now you got to get to the back. When you get to the back, that's all the further you can go from this joint. So here I am stitching. I need to get to the back. I can't go any further than this. So that's really kind of, picture that down here on your lap. This is all the further you can go. It's hard to get underneath there to end off your thread. So what you end up doing, and I can't because I have this overly tightened, what you end up doing is opening this one and putting this arm back so that you can get to the back. But then it's so far away from you, you have trouble seeing what you want to see to do. At least I do. Yeah, I have trouble seeing where I need to, or where I want to work a thread under. And then you have to bring it up. You have to retighten this. So you're putting all this extra tightening and retightening on this particular screw. And then to keep it from slipping down, you over tighten it, and then you end up stripping the screw again. So, like I said, this one has its time and place, and it is a very good stand. And I do like it, and I will still use it dependent upon the circumstances of where I'm stitching. Okay? If I'm stitching somewhere where I don't have a table, or I don't have one of those lap tables, I will use this. Okay? And I'm not unhappy with it, and I don't dislike it. However, I don't like it as much as I did in the beginning after using it for a year. Okay? So that's where we are with that. Now, the stand that I just got is, if you watch Country Stitchers, Deb and Liz each got Potoky stands. Luda, cross stitching with Luda, she has one. Teresa Little Stitcher, hi Teresa, she has one that she uses, and now I have one. And I really, really like this. Really like this. It is awesome for when you're sitting at a table. Okay, let me adjust you guys a little bit here, like this. Okay, so there we go. You're sitting at your table, and you bring it up. You can have it all the way up and tighten this to keep it there, or you can do whatever angle you comfortably stitch at. Okay, so I'm going to put it all the way up and bring you back up here a little bit. Okay, I'm going to bring you, there we go. Okay, so your hoop goes in here. You tighten it down. Now, the other thing I want to mention is on the Nurge stand, when you have your hoop in, it tends to wobble side to side, and you're constantly retightening it to keep it tight. This doesn't wobble at all, side to side, okay? So it does stay, and when you have your hoop in, then of course you adjust it to your stitching angle, and I can sit here and stitch like this. No problem. Very comfortable. I love it. What I like most, more than anything, is this. That stand, you have to flip things up like this to get to the back. This stand, there you go. You're on the back. You can see you're in your same position as when you were stitching from the front. You can see, you can do whatever it is you have to do on the back. It's right there in front of you. When you're done, you just turn it back and keep on stitching. That is what sold me on this stand. That feature alone was worth it to me on this stand. Okay. The other great thing is the Nurge stand will only hold a hoop. You can't use anything else on that stand but a hoop. So the second thing that sold me on this stand, I have to open it a bit more. And there's a nice little groove in here. I'm going to take these clamps off. Well, maybe I'll let one off. They have my little covers that I have to protect my stitching. I'll take those off, but let a clamp on here. The other thing is, it will hold. Okay, it's sliding because I don't have anything in there, but it will hold your Q-snap, just like it holds your hoop. Yeah. So you can use either or. You can use a Q-snap or you can use a hoop, whichever floats your boat. And the same thing. Now this one is, I have it a little long. Let me put this up a little higher. Okay, but the same thing. Flip it to the back. Is that not amazing? It's awesome. It's wonderful. Turn it back around. Keep stitching. Adjust it to where it's comfortable for you. You know, this works best on a table. I will admit that. It works best on a table. However, I have used it on my lap. If I'm sitting in my recliner chair, I do have a lap table that I will use. However, I have also just set it on my one leg and stitched that way. So it does work on your lap. I think if you watch some of the, what does Deb and Liz call them, where they sit and they just chat, they're Stitch With Me and chatting. Deb sits with it on her lap. I think the time I've seen Liz, and she has a different style, use hers, she did have it setting on the table. But either way, this works wonderful. And just this feature is awesome, that you can just flip it around to get to the back. That was the selling point along with the fact that you could use a Q-snap as well as, so you can use a Q-snap or hoop. Ooh, that reminds me of Romper Room. Oh, so either one. And someone asked me what size hoops I use. When I'm putting a hoop on a stand, this is the biggest. Now, this is a Nurge hoop. This is not a Hardwick Manor. And Hardwick Manors are wonderful, wonderful hoops. But let me tell you what, this Nurge hoop is just as good as a Hardwick Manor hoop. And this is a Nurge number 4. Let me see. It looks, the outer diameter is 8 inches, so the inside opening is 7.5. This is the biggest hoop I'll use because it's easy and comfortable for me to do this because I do prefer to stitch one-handed. So I have Hardwick Manor hoops and I have these. I do have 1 or 2 plastic hoops, but I don't use those on the full coverage. They leave more of a hoop mark than these do. And I like these wider ones as opposed to the ones that are narrow. And I forget the width on this. I can't remember, but it's the wider of, and even your Hardwick Manor ones, I prefer the wider as opposed to the thinner ones. So, but that is the nice part, and this is my go-to stand. They are pricey, I'm not going to deny that. They are a bit pricey, but well worth every bit. Let me see here. Where do I have? Let me find. Oh, here. Well, I thought I could put a picture in here of fractal. Let me see. I think I can't see. I gotta come closer here. I think it's this one. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. Here it is. Here you go. This is the one I have ordered. This is their floor stand. Now, yes, it's pricey. I'm going to tell you the price. It's $950. However, the shipping from Ukraine is free. So, I don't know what it would have cost to ship it, but it is free shipping. So this is what I have ordered. If it runs true to form of, oh, sorry, big truck just went by. Sorry about that. I have my window open. If it runs true to form as my mini stand did, it's probably going to take 6 or 7 months until I have it. However, that's okay. I'm quite okay with that. But it will operate the same way as the mini stand. So it will have the piece that will accommodate either a Q-snap or a hoop, and it will still flip the same way. And then you adjust your height with this here. you adjust where this, how far down this goes as opposed to how far up it goes. So I am excited to get that. I really am excited. Like I said, I have to learn some patience until it's ready. Um, but it will certainly be worth the wait. So let's see, do I have anything else on my agenda? This ended up being a little bit longer than I had initially planned. I think that's all I have. So if you have any questions, please leave them below in the comments, and I will do my very best to try and answer them for you. Any concerns, please put them down there. As always, if you're not a subscriber, please do think about subscribing so that you know when I have a video coming up. Probably so that I can show you some decent progress, my videos are going to be every 2 weeks instead of every week. Just so that you can see some progress on the pieces that I'm working on. And I will try and remember to take some pictures of where they're at today so that in 2 weeks we can actually see a difference as to where they are at that point in time. But like I said, if you are new here and you have found some things that you like, please do subscribe. I looked at the analytics on my YouTube, and it looks like for as many subscribers as I do have, which thank you all so very much, very much. I have just as many people who watch who aren't subscribed. So consider subscribing so that you know when we post, or when I post a video, and you can join. I am thinking about doing another live, and possibly we'll do a live video in 2 weeks instead of just a pre-recorded one, so that you can ask your questions right away and we can get them answered, and they're always a lot of fun to do. So we'll look at doing that. I have to think about a plan for that, but it may be coming your way in the future, in the near future. So with that, my friends, please stay safe. Please stay healthy. Get your vaccines. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. All that good stuff. And I love each and every one of you, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for stopping by. And Adam, if you're still here, love you to pieces, to the moon and back. And with that, folks, I will see you next time. Bye.